Rajendra Srivastava sir to the dais, please. A big round of applause for Rajendra sir. Please. Rajendra Srivastava is a former Dean of Indian School of Business and a Novartis Professor of Marketing, Strategy and Innovation. He comes with an experience of over 30 years as an academic and administrator. He has held several tenured faculty and administrative positions during his career. Before joining the ISB, he was Provost and Deputy President of Academic Affairs at Singapore University of Management. Professor Srivastava's research interests include marketing strategy, marketing metrics, and brand and customer management. His current work focuses on business model innovations. His current teaching areas include business model innovations, strategic performance management, marketing accountability, and driving growth and shareholder value. He is best known for his work on measuring the impact of market-facing business processes that create value for customers and the value of market-based assets. Today, Professor will be presenting and provide insights on financing the future, innovative economic models for hosting the Olympics in India, an approach towards sustainable funding and investment. So I request Professor to please take up his session for a day 2 of the International Conference on Research. Please, sir.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I guess you can. It's the clicker. So before I get into anything, it's important to figure out what is it that we're trying to finance, what is the aim, and the aim is not necessarily cost minimization. So I want you to picture what has been the impact of the G20 summit that we had earlier. I want you to imagine the impact of the Indian Premier League in cricket. You know, when I was young, which was a long time ago, the Vita is off sync by about 10 years. And when I was young, there were a few Indian cricketers who were invited to go and play in county cricket in England. And the rest of the cricketers were struggling. But now you see what IPL has done. It has led to participation across India, participation in cities. You see youngsters playing, and you see that it provides not only livelihood for the players in close competition to, for example, the National Football League in the US, but now we see India as one of the hubs, if you will, for global cricket. So when we think of financing something, what are we financing? Are we financing the future of sports? Are we financing the community participating? And how do we go about doing it is also going to depend on, will the events be concentrated, let's say, in one city? Or, for example, you take so many sports like kayaking. Now, I can tell you it will be difficult to do kayaking in Ahmedabad. You know, where will we do kayaking? You know, Himachal, Arunachal, Kashmir. So some of the sports are just going to have to be distributed. And so one way to look at it is a concentrated model. Another way to look at it as a distributed model. It's also important to understand how are we going to operate the Olympics. Now, we have a small audience and I have a limited amount of time, but what I like to do is have conversations rather than just do a lot of lecturing. So I want you to guess how many swimming pools would be needed just for the Olympic swimming events. So, how many think that 10 swimming pools will be enough? Raise your hands. How many think we need 20? How many think we need 30? How many think we need 40? In Paris, they had 60 swimming pools operational. Why? It's not just for the contest. People have to practice. So whether we're talking about swimming or we're talking about hockey, or if we bring in cricket, it's not just the contest, it is also preparing for it, practicing for it. So we have to visualize what needs to be done and not be caught flat-footed at the last minute, trying to struggle. So we need to build the infrastructure, we need to have operations related to the infrastructure. So what I will be doing is giving you a bit of an overview. This is not about discounted cash flow analysis, although I'm happy to do that. And so my focus is really going to, oops, I don't know how we got there. But yeah. Okay, sorry. We got too many slides forward. So what I'm saying is, we visualize, what the Olympics, can do for India. I've already talked about it. I think I need to be closer to the PC, okay. So we need to go about creating a culture for sports. And I already talked about the impact of IPL. But as we started IPL, we also saw the emergence of the hockey league, the football league, kabaddi, right? So one thing leads to another. So hopefully when we're doing the Olympics, it is also going to have an impact on multiple activities that we will be doing. What needs to be financed? It's not just the infrastructure. What about transportation? What about people coming into India? How do they get not only to the Olympic site locally, but how do we transport them into India? Also, what will be the infrastructure? We have to imagine the infrastructure. We also need to understand how that infrastructure will be used after the Olympics. So, for example, and I'm skipping forward in the interest of time, when the Olympics were held in Atlanta, they used the Olympics to reinvent the downtown area, but all the housing for the athletes and things like that was used as infrastructure for Georgia Tech University. So the Olympics literally helped start a new campus for a university. So we have to look at not only how are we going to house the athletes, but how do we use that infrastructure? So it does not become a white elephant. So it has to be integrated into the planning for the city. It also has to be integrated into the planning for the country. We have to worry about logistics and operations, and with logistics and operations, we're also going to run into issues related to security. What will be the operating costs, not just the construction costs, what will be the operating costs, and how are we going to finance the operating costs? And we have to, as I said, worry about security, and what is the investment. By the way, I see people taking pictures. Anybody who wants a deck is put together by my RAs and me the last 2 days. We'll be happy to share it with you. And there's no great, what we've done is put it together in a hurry, but we'll be happy to share it with you. So anybody who wants it, it's rks@isb.edu. rks@isb.edu. We'll send it to you. All right. So we also need to, finance the medals and so on. And it's real gold, it's not fake gold, and that can be expensive. And we also need to be able to finance the ceremonies and things like that. There'll be so many people, coming in, invited guests, etc. That is not cheap. And we need to perhaps, as we look at the Olympics, this is an opportunity for us to demonstrate, how can we do it in a sustainable manner, and how are we going to, manage that. So, in a sense, what I'm saying is, just as G20, just as IPL, etc., are being used to create brand India, when we look at the Olympics, it is more than a sporting event. It is an opportunity to invest in developing brand India. And what does brand India really mean? It means that there's more than Goa when it comes to tourism. When you look at Bangkok gets more tourists than Delhi and Agra combined. Thailand gets more tourists than India. With all the heritage sites that we have, there's more tourists going on. Now, this is an opportunity for us to bring people to India, but while they are here, why not take them to Hampi? Why just the Taj Mahal? Okay? So there's lots of connections that could be made. So people who are coming to India can see other parts of India, but it is also an opportunity for wherever the Olympics are hosted to build a sort of a hub and spoke model. Okay? The hub may be a city, but the kayaking events are in the hills. All right? So by doing that kind of a distribution, we can look at how do we build the sports culture. We could also, between now and 2036, how many years do we have? 12 years. So people don't just get interested in sports overnight. This is an opportunity if we particularly distribute events, things like badminton. Okay, India does very well in badminton. Why do we need to go for the premier tournaments outside of India? So the Olympics can also be used to launch the badminton league, global badminton league coming to India. So I just want you to think more broadly that way, developing the brand. Now this is based on a quick and dirty analysis that we did of the previous Olympics. And what we find is that about 30 to 40% of the costs are coming from public funding. In LA, it was 0%. All right? In Montreal, it was 100%. And in Montreal, they lost money, and it took them 20 years to pay off the debt that was created by the Olympics. So somewhere between Montreal and Los Angeles is a model that needs to be developed. Anyway, so public-private partnerships, another 20 to 30%. Corporate sponsorship, somewhere in the range of 10 to 20%. Then we can look at bonds, green bonds, etc. That will contribute 10 to 15%. And then ticket sales, etc., are only about 10%. Okay, so there's a lot of activity, that we need to kind of look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, talk about, as I said, Olympics beyond just the Olympics, to include tourism, and to give you a historical perspective. And I apologize for now you see it, now you don't, because I'm covering a lot of territory. And with that, what we need to do is we need to look at the sources of funding. And one source of funding is going to be really coming from the Olympic Committee. But we need to, as I mentioned earlier, look at the impact on the host city or the host cities. And for a country as large as India, and because of the diversity of the games, I think it's going to involve multiple sites. IOC contributions are typically only about 10 to 15%. This is what's going to come from the Olympic Committee. And the corporate sponsorships can run into billions. And one of the things that you may or may not have noticed, that India has become a hub for GCCs. What is GCCs? Global Capability Centers. So for example, there are companies like Wells Fargo that have 30,000 employees in India. So these companies are already looking at India as a source of human capital, and they will be competing for employees in India, and therefore they want to build their own brand name in terms of their contributions to India. So we should be looking at actually a higher number, if you will, when it comes to corporate sponsorships, both from Indian companies as well as multinationals. Ticket sales in hospitality, we've seen very different models that have been run. But again, you can see, for example, in London, they were able to get over $1 billion coming from ticket sales. And I think when it came to Paris, they also went over $1 billion. And but we should try to see if we can go beyond that, particularly if you see the multiplier effect, people coming here for the Olympics, but also going to see the heritage sites. Okay. In terms of government subsidies, I think I'm a believer in minimizing government subsidies. And I think to the extent we can, we should do it through public-private partnerships, and we should do it through direct investments. And so public-private partnerships have to be developed in advance. We can't do them at the last minute. And then we need to look at what is the benefit for the private side of the, how is the infrastructure generated, how are the things helping the corporate sponsorships. We can look at a lot of funding coming through licensing of the merchandise. And so this again has to be planned in advance. And we have working models. We're not starting from scratch. We can do case studies on what IPL has done, what the Kabaddi League has done. And we can look at what has been done elsewhere. We could look at the Wimbledon. So we have multiple case studies that we can learn from. And we can also look at naming rights. So whether it is the swimming pool infrastructure or the hockey fields and so on, we could look at that. For example, when you look at a university, you can name the business school, you can name the school for public policy. In a similar sense, we could be saying, okay, so-and-so is the sponsor for hockey, so-and-so is the sponsor for kayaking. So we can get umbrella sponsorships, but we could also have sponsorships for individual games. We could also be looking at broadcasting rights. A good model to study would be the National Football League, or locally, the IPL. I don't know what the numbers are for IPL in terms of broadcasting rights, but I will eat my hat if it is less than $1 billion. Okay, not a billion rupees, but I'm very sure it's over $1 billion. We can also be looking at how do we leverage social media. So we can look at how things have been done in the past, but we could also look at how do we use social media in order to get more people involved. But also, I'll give you some examples of how you're using new technology to generate money. What are some of the lessons that have been learned? In the past, Olympics have failed to deliver because they've just focused too narrowly only on the sporting events, too narrowly on the infrastructure. And they've left white elephants, meaning buildings, etc., that are not being used later on. So that's the point I was trying to make. Let's avoid white elephants. Let's make sure that whatever we design, we can use even after the Olympics. Need to bring in sustainable hosting practices, and this itself is a big study that we can do. But it's being these are some of the processes that have been put into place by countries like Australia, and we can look at what they have been doing in order to address the issue of sustainability. There will be public resistance, particularly if we are seen as blowing too much money. Okay? If it is tax money that is going to be used to finance the Olympics, of course we need some level of public financing, but we need to communicate to the public that, look, the public financing is only a fraction, but we need to be able to explain the long-term effects of that investment. And the long-term effects of that investment, again, IPL would be a good example, or Kabaddi would be even a better example of how, investment in the processes, investment in the structure actually generated cash flows for the future. So we need to, as I said, worry about that. In terms of some innovative financing models, and I'm speaking a little bit fast so we have some time, left over for Q&A. So just giving you a glimpse. What are some of the innovative ways? Number one would be, to some extent, decentralized. I mentioned earlier of sort of a hub and spoke system that maybe the finals are held in the major city, major hub city, but you have multiple tournaments that are taking place that lead to the quarterfinals and then the semifinals. So just as we distribute cricketing events, we should be looking at how do we distribute the Olympic events, and that takes the participation across cities. We should also be, I've already mentioned hub and spoke, but the idea out here is that this will lead to pan-India participation, pan-India involvement, into different sports. And, I'm from Lucknow originally, and I work out of Hyderabad now. In Hyderabad, badminton is very popular because of the badminton academy out there. So when we think of the Olympics, in advance of the Olympics, we should be thinking, what else could be done to generate the interest. So it's not just sporting events taking place in India, people flying in and flying out, but what is in it for us, for our children. As we are looking at a different world that we live in today, we can think of crowdsourcing, crowd sharing. My son is a musician, and musicians live hand on foot. But when he is trying to generate enough money to be able to do the tape recording, video recording, and to be able to come up with the albums, what happens is he's gone through crowdsourcing, and I put in, let's say, $1,000, some friend of his puts in $20, and so he's been able to raise money through crowdsourcing. I'm sure that when we look at something like the Olympics, we can also build a crowdsourcing platform. We could, oops. All right. So, we could be leveraging UPI. When it comes to digital transactions, India is now accounting for over 60% of the number of transactions globally. So I had mentioned earlier about microfinancing, and the UPI platform can certainly help integrate that. Lottery funds, whether we call it gaming, we could also have funds that are related to generating resources for the Olympics through lotteries. That, for example, you buy a lottery ticket, and that qualifies, or it puts you in the pool to get certain favored seating arrangements. And it may be targeted at the individual level. It can also be targeted at the company level. The global diaspora. Much has been said about foreign direct investment in India, and we've been hovering around 60 to 80 billion a year. When I was a kid, or when I was a teenager, if India got $500 million, 500 million, that was a big year. This is in the 60s. Now we're talking about 60 to 80 billion a year coming from corporate foreign direct investment. Now what do you think, how much do you think is the money that is coming from the Indian diaspora? Anybody guess? Is it 10 billion? Show of hands, is it more than 10 billion? Is it more than 20 billion? No hands. It is about 110 billion. Okay? So there's lots of resources that can be made available for the Olympics. But we need to figure out how we can channel that, how we can use the diaspora to build brand India. Let me ask you another question. Which Indian airline is in the top 10 in the world in market capitalization? Is it Air India? It's Indigo. It's in the top 10. Which Indian airline is in the top 5? Indigo. Which Indian airline is in the top 3? Indigo. Now, how the hell did Indigo get to be number 3 most valuable airline in the world? Have you been on a flight recently where all the seats haven't been sold? Okay? We have capacity utilization. If I go from, let's say, Hyderabad to Delhi, and I buy the ticket 2 weeks in advance, maybe it is 5,000 rupees. If I try to buy it 3 hours in advance, how much is it? 5 times that. So what has happened to the airline industry is the same thing that we're doing with Uber and Ola. This dynamic pricing. So just as we have pricing based on availability, why can't we also look at pricing of tickets? So there'll be some sports like hockey. And if India is getting to the finals, I'm telling you that more people will want to pay for it than if you don't even make the quarterfinals. So we could also be looking at things like dynamic pricing. Okay. All right, so we could be, in addition to the sports Olympics, in parallel, we could be running cultural Olympics. You've got this look on you, lady in green, you said, what the hell is professor talking about? Okay, we could be looking at, let's say, cultural Olympics in terms of, let's say, cultural dance competitions. Okay, now everything doesn't have to be the sports that are coming from the Olympic Committee. We can create some of our own, events that we want to do. There's coming up with intellectual property. Excuse me if I could have some water. Oh, sorry. So when you have a IP, royalty-free merchandise, what it leads to is people being able to use popular logos, but you'll get more merchandise, coming out related to the Olympics, and that will, impact and help the economy around the Olympics. Okay. And then experience auctions. What do we mean by that? Let's say somebody from the diaspora, are they willing to pay for special tickets to have dinner with the Indian cricket team? Okay. Now, people have paid $1 million to go to the inaugural ceremony with Mr. Trump, President Trump. Okay. I mean, he's a celebrity as a president. Isn't somebody like Virat Kohli a celebrity? And if it's playing cricket in the Olympics, whether it's the cricket team or the hockey team, can we have events, involving these athletes, and which can be also auctioned off if you want to think of it that way. I've already mentioned dynamic pricing, looking at Olympics in the same context as we do in Ola. Related to that is also what we call the surge. Okay, we could also have surge pricing. And the surge pricing, really depends on if there's too much demand for one event. By doing surge pricing, we can shift the demand to another event. Okay? And we can use profits from one event to subsidize another event. So these are new ways of thinking, and it requires that the committee that is put together is, it includes people from marketing, it includes people from finance, it includes engineers. So it can't just be that, oh, we got to build infrastructure, so let's get finance and engineering people. What I am best known globally is for bringing this concept that marketing is an investment, it is not an expense. Okay, why is it an investment? Because it creates future customers. And you'll see many companies competing on customer acquisition and retention. So the new competition is not based on factories, it's based on who is buying from you. And so this is work that I had done almost 25 years ago that is now being commonly accepted in something called SaaS models. Software as a subscription, but it is also product as a subscription. You could also look at infrastructure as a subscription model. So we can look at it that way. In terms of, we have the opportunity to look at something called, called a reverse sponsorship. And out here, the notion really is that companies, get to be able to use the opportunities that they have created and, include them into the Olympic Games. I know I've covered a lot of material, but we could also be looking at CSR into this plan. So CSR cannot just be used for research and helping the poor. It can also be used to helping with the Olympics that will help the poor that will be working during the Olympics. And let's see. We need to also look at insurance. Why is this important? Look at what happened to Tokyo in 2020. Okay, nobody knew what was going to be nobody knew about the pandemic. But Tokyo got caught in 2020 because of the pandemic. And we need to be looking at, how do we ensure our participation or our investment in the Olympics, and certainly some plans, should be included in that. Then, as I mentioned, what is going to be our marketing strategy? How do we take this thing global? People like Amitabh Kant had started with Incredible India, and we look at the G20. We should be looking at, if we are marketing India, how do we get, for example, from India, being less than Thailand in terms of tourism? How do we use the Olympics to take people coming to India into different parts of India, and how do we build India into a destination? And that means that it has to include everything: security, it has to include local transportation, it has to include hotel services, it has to include people who can show other people around. A lot of my friends, I'm not talking about Desi friends, but foreign friends who come to visit with me, I sometimes take my research assistant and said, hey, can you take them shopping to the Pearl Market in Hyderabad? Because then they can go back to the Pearl, buy something at the Pearl Market and take it back home. So all these things are valuable, getting to know India. So it's not just the sports events. It's like, how do we turn it into a bit of a cultural event? Basically, let me just really summarize very quickly that what we have to do is look at the overall picture. This is not just the Olympics. It is an opportunity for us to build brand India. And these are the historical cost numbers that I shared with you earlier on. The funding from the International Olympic Committee is only going to be about 10% or so. We have to figure out the remaining 90%. We have to minimize the public spending. India is not a rich country. And what we need to do is we need to get others to participate in funding, including foreign companies that are in India. And India is a big draw these days for human capital. India is a big draw After the US and China, it's the third largest and the fastest growing market for automobiles. It's also a big market for many, many areas, and it's a growing market. Many of you may not realize, but the growth rate, for example, in healthcare in India is over 20%, thanks to the government insurance policies. The growth rate for white goods, meaning refrigerators, etc., is hovering around 16%. The growth rate in aviation is about 24%. The growth rate in real estate is about 24%. Now, what that means is with growth rates of 15 to 20 to 24%, we're looking at the market doubling. The market doubling in some product categories by 100% in 5 years. Now, who doesn't want to be in that market? So I have written a paper with my students titled, "What is your India strategy? Does your company have an India strategy?" And this is talking about the value of being in India, and we should use the Olympics as a way to advertise the value of being in India, and then for people, for companies, for individuals who understand the value of being in India, we need to get them to invest in the Olympics. So rather than coming from public funds, let's get the funds out of corporate sponsorships. Let's get the funds out of innovative ways, dynamic pricing, etc., of selling the tickets. Let's get the funds of the Indian diaspora from globally. And let's look at it as a journey, as a solution, rather than a finance burden. Okay? So we have maybe 10, 15 minutes for Q&A. And this is what I thrive at. I like to listen and answer rather than lecture. So my lecture part is over. All right? Thanks.